is locked and loaded. When you were on before, I was saying that you are the chosen one in your home. And that are you pissed now that, Anderson here in Miami has taken your name? Just wondering.
It's tough. It's tough, but it's something you got to live with. Yeah, these things happen. Chosen Anderson. He's in there. He's going to get some target. He's talented. But he's going to take a back seat to Waddle and Hill, I think. I don't think he's replacing them anytime soon.
Yeah. I actually what I told Dolphin fans is I think he has no shot at making this roster. What I think Chris Greer did is, hey, let's be prepared just in case we are able to trade Cedric Wilson in the draft for some late pick, so we can move the salary off our books, because I'm sure you know this. Cedric was acquired before Tyreek became ever available, and so they were going to go with Waddle and Cedric. Cedric was finally going to get his shot coming out of Dallas to become a frontline player opposite of Waddle on the outside. Correct. Then all of a sudden, your favorite team says, we're going to make him available now because we're not going to pay Tyreek Hill. So then all of a sudden now, Chris Greer's like, hey, this guy's available. And they're like, well, forget that we just acquired Cedric. Let's go get Tyreek. And then Cedric became a luxury now. So maybe they unload him in the draft for a 6th, 7th rounder, maybe a 5th rounder if they're lucky. I doubt it, because whatever team takes him, they have to take on a salary. So you're going to have to give up almost nothing in compensation. So it'll be hard for the Dolphins to get any real compensation. It'll be like a throw-in pick. Or there are injuries in training camp throughout the offseason or something, God forbid, and then he gets a chance. I think he's no more than an insurance policy is what I've been telling Dolphin fans out of that, because he's not reliable enough for you to count on him. So that's already a risk as it is. If you're going to try to count on Robbie Anderson, that, my friends, is a gamble.
Yeah, it is. It is a gamble. I mean, he was on 2 teams last year for a reason. So, look, you're taking a flyer on the guy that when he was with the Jets showed some real talent. I mean, that was the guy that the Panthers brought in thinking, okay, maybe he's a part of our future. It didn't work out. You bring him into the Dolphins, and you have the opportunity in that room to say, look, man, like, we don't need you. We would like you to be here. We think you could be a complimentary piece. But if there's any kind of an issue, like, we can just move on. It doesn't really matter. So, I always think if you're a team that wins, and the Dolphins are certainly turning that corner, you can bring in more guys, maybe like Chosen, who is coming off of a year where he was on 2 different teams. And you can say, look, you can fit into our culture. You can be part of this. We'd love you to be here. We don't need you to be here. I think you look around the league, you see that happening. Like Belichick did that all the time. Belichick was famous for that. Is still famous for that. The Chiefs brought in Kadarius Toney last year.
Completely different. See, that's a different situation. That's a kid that had some injury stuff that's kind of held him back, whereas, this kid is more of a knucklehead. That's what's kind of held him back at times. And by the way, Tony had his knuckleheadedness.
I was going to say, though, there was
when he was in Florida.
He did, but the Giants also, look, I think the Giants were kind of at the end of their wick, so to speak, with Tony. I think that relationship was kind of cooked by the time he got moved to the Chiefs. So, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But
the other thing is your team has the drug that the Giants don't. So, the receiver comes in and, he has the injuries and a little inconsistency and all that kind of stuff. But then he looks at the quarterback, he looks at the situation. It's not so sexy. All of a sudden now he gets traded to Kansas City, and it's like, oh shit, if I screw my head on right and I get on the field and I'm healthy, I'm actually going to get the ball. I'm going to be a star in this place because I'm playing with effing Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid. My God, and I'm sure his agent's like, kid, this is like, they've thrown you into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's up to you, bro. Don't get swallowed by the chocolate river. Stay around and enjoy the food. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like two different scenarios. Anderson's trying to hang on to dear life to his career. Tony, everybody knows, can be a star if he's just, if it's tweaked just a little bit what's going on with him.
No, I hear you. And Anderson, look, last year he did nothing. He had 282 yards. Year before that, 519, 5 touchdowns, which if that guy's a depth player on your roster is not bad. But the year before that, he had 1,100 yards. Like, he has talent. I mean, he's had 941, 779, 752. If you're the Dolphins, if you're Miami, you're thinking, can we get 700 yards out of him? Like if Wilson, if they were to move him or whatever happens, if they have to
That's
slide
perfect number 3, 700 yards.
That's what I'm saying. Right. If he ends up being the third guy, can he give you 700 yards? And if he can do that, great. Now, if he's your number 4, then heck, then if you get 400 yards out of him, you're happy, right? Then what, that's all gravy. But for Miami, look, it's a no risk deal. I mean, why not? You bring him in, you kick tires. If it doesn't work, fine. If it does work, then great. Then you got something late in free agency that's useful to you during the season.
I'm with you there. All right. What about this Trey Lance stuff? Getting calls. Now, this story is kind of weird to me, okay? Because the Niners say they're not making any calls, but people are calling them because everybody's assuming that Purdy's going to be the starter. But see, here's where I don't buy the bullshit. Okay? If they're calling you for Trey Lance and low-hanging fruit. They're not calling you because they think Trey Lance is great and they're trying to offer you a first rounder to try to make up for the 3 first rounders in the second that you gave up. No, they're calling you because they'll say, well, you guys aren't going to use Trey Lance. We'll give you a 5th rounder for him or something like that. So I would imagine that the people that are calling for Trey Lance, they're really not offering much because at this point, what's there to offer for Trey Lance? You haven't seen anything. He hasn't shown you enough as it is, and he's already lost his job. That's what the optics are.
So let's run through this, okay? Because I'm not only fascinated by this whole thing, I'm also a bit tired of the way it's all talked about. So here's Trey Lance went to North Dakota State, okay? His freshman year, 2018, he threw 1 pass. Then he threw 287, okay, in 2019. 2020, because of COVID, North Dakota State played 1 game, threw 30 passes. All right, now, in those 318 collegiate attempts, he threw 30 touchdowns and 1 pick. That's great. He threw 318 collegiate passes. Now, you go to the 49ers. So, since 2018, all right, with the Niners, he's thrown 102. He's thrown 420 passes in the last 5 years. Well, that's 5 years. Like, for reference to how insane that is, last season, Joe Burrow threw, 606. I mean, Trey Lance has basically thrown 10 games worth of passes in 5 years. The Niners gave up 3 first-round picks. Now, let's also be real about this. Now, Ian's reporting this. Maybe it's even elsewhere. I saw Ian Rappaport's tweet about it. Why would this get leaked? The teams calling the 49ers are not leaking this thing. Like, nobody's making a phone call about a trade and then leaking out that they're making a phone call about a trade. Otherwise, it would be X team is calling, right?
Right.
So it's the 49ers, and it was very specific. They are not making calls. They're receiving calls. Well, that tells me that's coming out of the Niners. So it's like you're trying to drum up interest prior to the draft that, hey, we're not ready to move him. But if you're willing to give us an offer that we would take, then please do it. My question is, on the outside looking in, if I'm a team thinking of acquiring him, I'm thinking about it long and hard of why do the Niners want to move off this guy? They gave up 3 first-round picks for Brock Purdy. And a second. Brock Purdy is coming off a torn UCL. He's not going to be ready for the year. They've got Sam Darnold, who's essentially ready to start the year if Trey Lance doesn't do it. And the Niners are ready to move off of this guy they gave up all that draft capital for. Doesn't exactly scream of a guy who they're just in love with. So to me, like, why would you give up anything more than, I don't know, at the most a 3rd or a 4th round pick?
Right.
Why would you give anything more than that? He's proven nothing. So I get it. Like, if you're the Vikings and you say, hey, look, let's bring him in, sit him behind Cousins for a year. He's cheap. And, oh, fine. I'm not bringing him in to be a starting quarterback. The Niners don't even think he can be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, no. And let me tell you something. That third or fourth rounder, is it really worth the negative PR you're going to get because you gave up all of that and then you just gave them away? You're better off actually trying to develop them and see if you can get a real quarterback out of him. You're almost better at failing by playing him than settling and saying 3 years after you gave up a three first rounders in a second, well, we gave him away for a third or a fourth. Like, holy shit, that's a lot of draft capital you ended up losing in the process. And boy, Brock Purdy better not be a one-year wonder.
I just said to somebody else the other day when I was on radio, I said, one thing that's really interesting is because everybody's talking about Rodgers, of course, and what's going to happen, and the draft's coming up. If the Niners trade Trey Lance, there's a spot open on their roster. And I wonder if you're the 49ers, especially let's say you get a third round pick for him. Maybe you're using that pick to help sweeten the pot. Maybe they go after Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I've been thinking about this now for a while. Like this stalemate, at some point, does another team not jump in here and go, okay, look, we weren't going to do it, but if the Jets are just going to sit there and stare at the Packers, and the Packers are going to sit there and stare at the Jets, maybe it's worth it to us. Like if the because from people I've talked to in the league, one thing that is interesting, there has been a thought that the Packers are more interested in draft capital for next year's draft because you've got Caleb Williams coming out and Drake May coming out and some other intriguing quarterback prospects. And if Jordan Love doesn't work out, now the Packers are loaded up with picks for the following year when all these quarterbacks are available. So if we get through the draft and the Jets still haven't made a move, the Niners are loaded to the hilt next year with draft capital. This year, they're not. This year, they don't have a lot of their picks. They traded for Lance. They traded for McCaffrey. Next year, that all changes. So if you're San Francisco and this thing goes through the draft, do you then say, you know what? We'll beat out the Jets offer. We're good with that. And if you're Rodgers, where would you rather go? I mean, I don't even think it's a question, right? I mean, they're the best team in football, Rodgers. So I think that is a fascinating thing to watch, especially if this drags on through the draft.
Well, this Titan, you think the Titans are really interested in Rodgers?
I don't think he's interested in them. I just, why would he go there? For what reasoning? And he doesn't, to be clear, he doesn't have no trade clause or anything like that. But he's got to be happy there. That's going to be miserable. Like, why, if you're Tennessee, I get why Tennessee would be interested in him.
Well, they got a good defense. They got a decent line. They got a running game.
He's got
no
a
tight end. Treylon Burks is kind of young. You would have to go get a veteran receiver to kind of help him out overall, because that's kind of the same problem he had in Green Bay, that he didn't have, a great receiving core. They just wouldn't do enough for him at times. But yeah, I mean, outside of the receiving core, everything else is pretty stable. Right?
I agree. I don't. The line right now is
the line is not great.
The line, they cut Lewan. They let Nate Davis go. That line now they brought in Dillard from the Eagles, who they're hoping can replace Lewan. But the line is a big question mark. They don't have weapons like that. That team is one ankle injury from Derrick Henry away from scoring 10 points a game. So I mean that's my thing. If you're Rodgers, do you want to go there? Like now, let's be clear about this. He's not playing for the Packers next year. So this is going to be, at some point, rubber's going to meet road. He's going to get traded. I'm looking right now at the 49ers. So going forward in 2024, they got the first and second rounders. They have 2/3, they have a fourth, a sixth, and a seventh. And then in 2025, they also have 2/3 because of D'Amico Ryan's getting hired away as a head coach. So I just wonder, if you're the Niners and this thing goes through the draft, do you call the Packers up and say, you know what? We'll take him. We'll make it work. You got to eat some of the money, but we'll sweeten the pot with a better package of picks. Now, if you're the Packers, why would you care? If I'm them, I'd trade him to the Niners. He's only going to be there for a year or two, and they're not winning.
Right.
It doesn't matter to them, right?
You've already said you're kind of retooling now. You're moving on.
It's not like you're trading him to the Bears. To me, if I'm the Niners, I don't care. Or excuse me, I'm the Packers. I'll take wherever the best deal is. So I believe that at some point here, look, the Jets to me have leverage in the sense that the Packers are not going to pay him $58 million in cash before September. But if somebody else gets involved, the Jets have a real problem. And I think once you get past this draft, other teams might get involved.
Yeah, although I saw Andrew Brandt say that they can break up the salary part of it, the $40 million, into 2 years in June, so they can kind of take a $20 million cap hit this year and then set up the rest for next year, which then would which would buy them more time again. And I think right now what they're looking at is this Tennessee thing. If there's any truth to it, it's a blessing to the Packers, because all of a sudden now they're getting some leverage to use against the Jets. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, it's up to Rodgers that he has to want to go there. You know what I mean? And you make a great point, because he'll definitely want to go to San Francisco. There's no doubt he's going to want to go to San Francisco, being a West Coast guy, playing out there in Berkeley and all that shit. So I'm sure he wouldn't mind being in San Francisco. But the Packers have got to be loving this, because somehow or another, the Jets have taken a really hard line approach to all of this.
The Jets, like I said, I think they still have the leverage in the sense that at some point the Packers don't want to pay this money, and he can't go back there, and they know that. But the Jets, this is now like, okay, now I'm not advocating for anybody to do this, but, kids at times, back in the day, hopefully not anymore, would play games of like chicken, right? If you live near a railroad, you play chicken or whatever. The Jets are playing chicken, but now like the train's getting like fairly close here. It's time to get off the rails. And if they get through this draft, like that train's 5 feet away, because at some point you run the risk of a team like San Francisco going, you know what? Fine. We'll make a better offer than you. I mean, as much as they have to pay Rodgers in cash, which is the $58 million, his cap hit's not crazy. Like for an example, if you're looking at Rodgers' contract, all right, his contract as it sits, his cap hit for this season is 31.6. All right. Now, if he gets traded post June 1, the Packers are saving 15.8 million. So they all of a sudden save money instead of having to eat an extra 8.6 million in dead caps. That helps them. And then the team that's acquiring Rodgers, his cap hit's only $16 million. So like you can afford it. That's not crazy. A team can absolutely afford to make that happen. Right now, the Niners are sitting a little over $3 million, but they could sit there. They could extend people. They could restructure a contract. I mean, teams do that all the time. It would not be out of the realm of possibility for the Niners to just restructure a guy or two and get Rodgers in the fold, especially if he's only planning on playing for a year.
Should the Buffalo Bills be a little concerned about Stephon Diggs not reporting to the start of offseason program? Is it a thing or not a thing?
I think it's a minor thing. It's not because of his contract, because he just got a new contract. So that's not the problem. It's frustration, right? I mean, you would think, if it's anything. My concern with the Bills going forward is last year was supposed to be the year they won the Super Bowl. Everybody and their mother picked them. I picked them. They were the odds-on favorite in Vegas. They didn't just lose in the playoffs. They got clobbered. They got embarrassed in that game against Cincinnati in their own building.
Hell, they almost lost to the Dolphins, bro.
Yeah, Skylar Thompson. Like, if the Dolphins could have managed the clock in that game, they would have beat them, okay? I just wonder with Buffalo, with this current group, I mean, I'm not saying there's a window closing. They have Allen. They'll be good for 15 years. With this current group, was that their best shot? Was that their best shot to do it? I mean, Kansas City was reloading. You got Cincinnati at home. The division wasn't particularly good. I mean, Miami was good, but dealt with a lot of injuries with Tua. Like, that lined up for you to really be able to have a stronghold. They beat Kansas City at Arrowhead in the regular season for the second straight year, and yet they couldn't finish the job. And I wonder now with them, is this going to be one of those? Remember the Chargers with Norv Turner when they had all that talent? I mean, they had Merriman, and they had Rivers and Tomlinson, Vincent Jack, and all these guys.
Yeah.
And every year you're like, God, that team. But then they get on the field. Now, to be fair, the Bills actually made the playoffs. Like the Chargers halftime wouldn't even do that with Norv. But you'd be like, what is wrong with this team? Why can't they get over the hump? Or the Texans those years, and they first started to come on with Schaub, and they had Watt and Hopkins. But there was always just something missing. I'm wondering now with the Bills after last season and the way that ended with a big thud, is there just something missing with this team? Is it the coaching? Is it just the lack of imagination in terms of their scheme? Is it the lack of a pass rush? Because you look at the Bills roster, man, it's not getting any younger. A lot of these guys are 30, and Diggs, Miller, Poyer, Hyde. They're not young. Mitch Morse, Deion Dawkins is getting toward 30. Like, this is not a team you'll look at and go, yeah, that team's going to be together for the next 6 years. It's not. That's not the case.
And I think Josh Allen, too, is another guy that's got to kind of live up to the hype that we've all put on him in a way. And he's had his erratic moments. And I think some of that Stephon Diggs frustration is with Josh Allen. I know Josh Allen kind of downplayed it and said, that's his guy and they get along great and that he's a competitor and all that. And he loves that he's intense and all that kind of stuff. But I think some of the frustrations with Diggs has been with his quarterback at times. And if you look at the quarterback, as much as we've talked him up, he's had his moments where he has not kind of put the team over the top too.
He has. At some point, you've got to wear a little bit of that. Now, if you go back and look, the first time they made the playoffs, they played the Texans in a weird wild card game. They weren't that good yet. They just kind of got in. Okay, that's fine. You wet your feet, fine. The second year they got in, they went all the way to the AFC Championship game. Allen was not good in that game. The Bills were not good in that game. The Chiefs waxed them easily. Now, the next year was that 13 seconds game where Allen played about as well as anybody could possibly play, but he played on a night where Mahomes played a quarter inch better. And I think the Bills coaching staff really pretty much screwed them over that night and cost them that game with the way they decided to play the last 13 seconds. But then last year, he didn't play well against Miami. He did not play well. There were turnovers. There were a lot of missed throws. And then that Bengals game, he and the rest of that team, all of them, they all didn't play well in that game. Everybody didn't play well.
Yep.
My bigger problem with Allen and the Bills, though, if I'm being frank, is not even so much their playoff performances, although obviously last year's were disastrous. It's these games in the regular season they should never lose that they lose. It's cost them seeding. But that is one thing over, like the Chiefs, they lose games. They don't lose to bad teams. It's very, very rare. Like literally in Mahomes' career, I'm doing this off the top of my head, I think in his entire career, they've lost to 3 teams with a sub 500 record. They don't lose those games. The Bills lose those games. They lost to Urban Meyer's Jags a couple of years ago. That's why that 13 seconds game was at Kansas City. They lost the game last year to Zach Wilson. Like that's why they were the 2 seed instead of having a bye. They that crazy game against Minnesota where they're kneeling down. They lose. Like you can't lose those games in this conference. This conference is too good. That's the difference between being home for the playoffs and getting your butt whipped in the second round because now you have a harder matchup. I mean, while Buffalo had to play Cincinnati, the Chiefs got Jacksonville. Jacksonville's better. They're not Cincinnati. The Chiefs got an easier matchup. Then they had to play the Bengals, and they took care of business. But the Bills have got to stop having these games that are just ridiculous losses during the season. It's killing them, and it killed them the last couple of years.
What do you think happens with Saquon Barkley and now Josh Jacobs, 2 guys that are not signing their tenders? And we all know how the running back position is treated in the NFL, and it's the most interchangeable position in all of pro sports, pretty much, because it's just one that's not valued as it is. What happens in this situation with Saquon and Josh Jacobs?
I mean, if I'm those 2 teams, I would just take a line. So that's fine. We're not gonna pay a running back major money. And I think it's if you're the running back, whether you're Jacobs or you're Barkley, well, what do you do? I mean, you're not gonna take that money. You're not gonna play out a year of your career where you really get a nice payday. I know it's a 1-year deal, but it's a life-changing amount of money. You're not gonna take that money. So I just think in the end, Barkley's had a significant injury history. You're not gonna pay him, in my opinion. Now, do one of these teams fold? If I had to bet and say which one of them would do it, the Raiders. the Raiders historically are not exactly the most well-run franchise in the world. And I could see the Raiders saying, look, we got to pay Jacobs because Carr's gone, Waller's gone, Renfro's off a down year. We'll see what he does if he bounces back. Adams is the only guy in that offense right now to start. Defensively, I mean, you got Crosby. Who else are you selling a jersey for?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they may look at it from that perspective. But if I were those teams, I would hold that line. I would not pay. I know that's it's a rough bit of business, but it's business. And in the NFL, I'm not paying a running back a big second contract unless that guy is generational. Earl Campbell in his prime, Walter Payton, guys like that. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm not paying Barkley, who's been good one year, hurt the next. Jacobs, who they didn't even exercise the option on. And then he went out on an incredible year. I wouldn't pay it.
I think a lot of people, not everybody, but I think a lot of people in our business, they do it because they have a passion for our business. Lord knows there isn't a lot of money involved, especially early on. You are not getting paid well, unless you're a former athlete that they hand you all this shit. But the rest of us, like you and me, that have to kind of walk and kind of, work our way up in this business, there's a lot of passion behind it. And we get to do something that we love because a lot of us were sports fans growing up and all that kind of stuff. So I think I'm correct, right? You're doing what you love, right, in this job, correct?
I am. They pay me to watch football and write about it.
Right, exactly. So you and I are one of the few that get to do that, right? And so I would imagine that there's a lot of players, and you and I have met a lot of the players that actually do this for the love. There are some that are just motivated by the money. There's no doubt about it. So when we look at DeMar Hamlin, who's not a high round pick, who's not a guy that was making a ton of money, and then went through a life-altering situation that could change you mentally, physically, and all of that. But he has now decided that he is healthy. He's going to try to get back on the field. And knowing what you know and what I know, that you and I are in the 5 percentile, that we actually love our jobs, no matter all the bullshit that we have to deal with at times, but we love what we do. So is DeMar Hamlin making a decision based on passion or insanity?
Passion. And he's been cleared by medical professionals. I don't blame him. I'm not going to sit there and be that guy who's like, if I was him, because I'm not him. And I didn't go through what he went through. But if he feels confident and the doctors are saying, hey, he's okay to go, God bless him. Go play. Go play football. I mean, I think, I always feel terrible when anybody gets injured in football or any sport, because these guys play, they work their whole lives. I mean, people don't realize, with all due respect to anybody out there who watches the sport, like how hard these guys work. I think there's sometimes a thought like, hey, I turn the TV on, the guys are on Sunday. No, that guy is training day and day. This isn't the 70s where guys were smoking packs of cigarettes in the locker room. And and then they came out and played a little football. These guys train year round, day in, day out, couple training sessions a day, a lot of them. Like DeMar Hamlin worked his whole life to get to that point and was making himself a nice little career. I mean, it was starting to get some playing time. I think if the doctors will clear him, he should go out and play football if that's what he wants to do. And I think it's a great story that had a horrifying beginning, but might have a great ending. And I for him, if he wants to continue to play out his career, all the power to him, as long as those doctors give him the thumbs up.
By the way, what's the difference with Evel Knievel? Breaking bones left and right, still got back on the motorcycle to make the next jump, right?
Have you ever seen that documentary out on him? I think.
It's
wild stuff.
Yeah, dude. How about wrestlers?
Yeah.
Maybe he gets a herniated disc or something, and a couple months later, he's back on the top of the ring, diving off and diving on somebody's body or something. A race car driver that, I don't know, flipped 8, 6, 7, 12 times, and the car went into eight pieces, and 2 weeks later, he's walking out of the hospital, and guess what? A week later, he's back to training and testing and ready to race the next race. And
it's what these people do for a living.
It's what what they do for a living. So what are we supposed to do? We have police officers that get every day in that car, and they have no idea if they're coming back to see their families at the end of the day. And this is every day that they put their lives on the line. So, we have to kind of put it in perspective. And sometimes you got to do what you love, man. You know what I mean? And I'm sure these crazy ass skateboarders and BMX guys, they break all kinds of bones. And then they're back to doing all that weird and wild shit and flipping 8 times and coming back down on the pool or the pike or whatever the hell it is that they're performing on. And there's a lot of crazy bastards doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but that's what they love to do. And this is what I would say about Damar Hamlin. God bless you, bro. Do what you love to do. And that's what makes you who you are, and it's crazy, but it's passion. There's no doubt behind it. No doubt.
I think he's absolutely right if he wants to play, as long as they'll clear him. And if they'll clear him, go after it, man. You worked your whole life for it. Go play. Play.
I saw a doctor say it's like if lightning hit you twice. So
that's that's the other part of it too. Like, it's not like, as far as we know, or anything, it's not like just some condition he had. Like, it's just, that was just one of the weirdest freak. I mean, how many times have you watched a football game, seen a collision? Literally a million. What are the odds that happens?
It's never happened.
Right. I mean,
6 years. It's the first time I saw it with all the thousands of collisions we've watched. That's the first time I ever saw it happen.
Yes.
Right there.
I would agree with that doctor's sentiment that the odds of that happening are just insane. So go play football.
I just think that people don't take into account that I think people don't realize how many people are constantly risking injury or their lives almost every day or in whatever work of life that they're at. Just because most of us don't do it, you and I, we get to work behind a mic, so we're really not putting our lives on the line. But we don't realize it, bro. There's a fireman putting his life on the line right now somewhere in the world. And there's policemen, millions of them all over the world, that are constantly putting their lives on the line. And we have military people all over the world, and they have chosen to be in the military. And every day they're putting their lives on the line. Now, the guy that's working for Florida Power and Light, climbing up those damn poles full of, electrical wires. Dude, you're putting your life on the line every single moment. It's not weird what Damar Hamlin's doing. Lots of other people do the same thing.
I agree.
It's crazy. All right. What do you got going on SI so folks can check you out, my friends?
Tomorrow, we are Tomorrow we are running. I have a mock draft that is essentially mocking mock drafts, where I traded every single first round pick, and we had a field day with it. That was a lot of fun. I did it in a way that was serious in terms of, like, I made the values work out, and I made the players fit with the teams. But every pick got traded. All 31 in the first round, all got moved around. Then next week, piece I'm really excited about, which comes out a week from today, it is revisiting the 1983 draft. I talked to a lot of people for it. Bruce Matthews is in that piece. Tony Dungy's in that piece. Lee Steinberg, who repped a couple of the guys in that piece. There's a great story Dungy tells about Marino in there. In fact, there's a lot about Marino in there. So I would implore people to check it out. That's going to be a big feature piece for us over at SI, and I hope people read it.
There you go. And follow him on Twitter at Matt Verderame, and catch his work there at Sports Illustrated. Matt, as always, thank you, my brother. We'll catch up next week. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, sir. There you go. Matt Verderame. We step out of the huddle.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.